How's that? Now that's embarrassing. Woof, and I'm peeking here. Peeking like mad. Okay, how's that sound? Hopefully now people can hear me. That was silly. All right. Avatar of Cain, funnily enough, We Stand on Guard for Thee is correct, but not here. Kind of. There are two versions of the national anthem, and there's kind of a third. The national anthem of Canada is either in English or in French. There's actually also an indigenous version of the anthem. And then in Quebec, sometimes you hear an anthem which uses both languages. So it starts in French and then it ends in English. So We Stand on Guard for Thee is at the end of the anthem in both the English and the hybrid version. Interestingly enough, Erwin, I don't believe we should sing national anthems at sporting events, with the exception of the Olympics. I find it jingoistic and I find it weird. We're here to watch a sporting event, not to celebrate a country. So, it's not that I don't like our national anthem. I think it's fine. It's not like I don't like my country. I think it's fine. It's just, it's a weird thing about national anthems is that I find that they sometimes crop up in weird situations, and if there's one thing that I don't like the feeling of being indoctrinated. Anyway, I hope people are having a good Tuesday. I am, because I don't have to work today, which is why we were able to do this stream. If you watch to the end, you will be able to follow up on this stream with Scott. Scott will be streaming this afternoon, right after this ends. So that's what we've got going on right now. I think he's going to be playing Date Everything, continuing that thing. So if you want to watch Scott try to kiss things or possibly even put his wiener where somebody consents to, you can do that. You're still at work for an hour and a half, but you need a distraction, Mr. Rich. I totally get you. Unfortunately, my work's at the point where now I can't watch things while working. Lately, it's been very much focused on helping other people, so I can't actually be distracted. It's less like spreadsheet work and more hands-on. What the? What do you mean, what the? Why would you say that? Everybody knows. Everybody knows. I also haven't shaved. I didn't shave today. All right, well, whatever. Who cares? We're here to talk all things role-playing, tabletop, LARP, online, and the like. And I'm in brute mode. Why would I talk about skills? Well, you know, when my playthings aren't here, I miss them. I have been watching with great interest a thread that has been piling up in the RPG Clinic Discord. And it's about suggestions that people have had for games that we might play next. So, first, I'm gonna throw some things out there just to make things clear. Also, I'm vamping a little bit for time because we tend to get a trickle in. I'm also going to say we're discussing this stuff now live on Twitch, and you should go and look at this event if you have not already. There we go. Okay. So, first things first, we are currently playing Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition. We have been for quite some time. It's now our second longest campaign that we've run on the channel, which is very cool. But it also does not have an end date yet. Sometimes when we start asking these questions, it's because we know that we're starting to come up against a conclusion for a current campaign, and that is not the case right now. We do not have a conclusion planned. We have discussed. And part of the reason why we've discussed is because we're checking in with each other a lot of the time, and we want to make sure that we're having a good time. But we also take into account our schedules. So Kate, Elizabeth, Scott, and I all have our own stuff that we're doing. And there are sometimes times where one of us or more than one of us can't make multiple streams. When that's the case, if we are at a point where we're thinking, oh, well, maybe it's worth it to take a break, then that's an option for us to consider ending a campaign. But it's also an option for us to consider pausing a campaign or even just writing a character out for a few sessions. So what I should say right here and right now is when we are thinking about what our next campaign will be, it's often in advance. Part of the reason why we think now much further ahead than we used to is because we've run into a few issues when trying to select a new campaign. Notably, we don't like running many one-shots one after the other before starting a new campaign. It stalls our momentum. We find that people start not tuning in after past the first couple of one-shots, probably because there isn't really much to bring them back other than us, which is fine, but I get it. People want to watch a long-running campaign, mostly on our channel. That's what they've come for. So in the past, when we've been like, well, we're ending a campaign, but we don't know what we're starting yet next, that causes us to flounder. This channel isn't really for watching us play video games. It's not really for watching us play a whole ton of one-shots. So we try to limit those. Now, that's not to say that we don't enjoy one-shots. We really do, and we do like playing them. Recently, we had 10 Candles with Skylar, who guested on the stream. We have a lot of friends who want to guest on the stream. The problem is, of course, we actually don't have a lot of room. When we do finally our behind the scenes thing, which we keep talking about, but we should actually just get around to doing at one point or another, you'll see that we're quite cramped for space. We literally can't add a fourth player, fifth if you count me, in this room and then stay on camera. It's just not really that possible. So we tend to only take guests when one of us can't make it. It's the way it goes. But one-shots are a delicate topic for us when it comes to them happening in succession. That also includes things like mini campaigns. Mini campaigns we've done a few times in the past. Scott ran Blades in the Dark as a mini campaign, for example. And we have had fun with those, but we also tend to try to figure out what we're trying to get out of them. Like, why are we doing this? What is it that we are looking for? So when we're discussing how we choose our next campaign, I'll get into the topic of mini campaigns. But another reason why we want to choose something far in advance is because we no longer want to run things that we have not tested. If you go back in our history, which I will open up here so that I can make sure that I have all the stuff for you. So our previous campaigns have included Exalt Switch Nexus, Changeling the Streaming. Then we did Star Wars Reach. Star Wars Reach was the first example of a campaign that we ran where we hadn't tested it enough. And I started bouncing off the system pretty brutally. Hey, Dio. Oh, it's good to see you. It's always good to see you, Dio. Yeah, we bounced off it pretty brutally, or at least I did. The mechanics I didn't like. The setting was fine, but there were some struggles in making sure that we could get people thoroughly involved in it. And also, in terms of our character creation, we didn't have set goals or cohesion in the group. So it often felt like I was running 3 separate games at the same time, where every once in a while they would coincide. I'm not putting blame on any of this other than myself, but when the player characters didn't have really well-defined goals or cohesion, then there wasn't much to keep the game rolling. But mostly it was the mechanics for me. There are things that we can do to resolve it. Like I could have stopped the game and talked to the players and figured out a way that we could have tried to realign or even restart the game, right? Just new characters and the like. But honestly, the mechanics for me just were a no-go. And we hadn't tested enough. We hadn't played a few sessions to see how it would feel. We just did enough so that we checked, do we understand the mechanics, not do we like the mechanics? And therefore we started a stream and it was a failure in the end. Failure is a kind of a strong word. I still had fun with playing Star Wars Reach. Like it's not like it was a slog for me, but it definitely didn't catch the way that I wanted it to for myself. So after we tried Star Wars Reach, then we moved on to Exaltwitch Academy. And Exaltwitch Academy, we started out playing 3rd edition with the Dragon-Blooded source book that is behind me there. We tried that for a bit. And then we swapped. We swapped over to Exalted Essence halfway through. And we had not tested that properly. We hadn't played it. Again, we played it a couple of times to make sure we understood the mechanics, but we didn't play it to make sure that we enjoyed the mechanics. And at the time, the mechanics were also not finalized. This was before the book had come out. The manuscript and the Kickstarter had been released. That's it. So we played those rules, and we did not find them as enjoyable, partially because the characters felt different. When we changed the rule set, it changed the abilities that the characters had, and therefore they didn't feel like the same characters that we started with for the players, and I totally get that. But then also, the mechanics themselves didn't really work for us. Now, caveat, we haven't played through a proper Exalted Essence because we didn't have the final book. I still don't think I would choose Essence personally, but that's me. Hey, Kung Fu Fenris. That was an issue. We had changed systems without properly giving it time. Mistrich is saying, I played Legend of the Five Rings and I knew after like 3 sessions it was not a game I was into for the same reasons, which is a shame because I love the lore. We'll get to Legend of the Five Rings in a second. Yes, we will. Yeah, I'm very leery of Essence, Kung Fu Fenris. I think that it's they oversimplified some things to make it so that there's ways to abuse it, and yet it is not simple. So if I'm playing with still quite a bit of crunch, but the crunch doesn't feel satisfying to play with, I'm not sure it's what I would choose. Anyway. Again, we can get to all of this. But then after Exaltwitch Academy, we didn't know what we were going to play next until I had started pitching a version of Legend of the Five Rings, which was set in a cyberpunk setting, which I called Neo Rokugan, which was an exciting idea, not just for the players, but also we announced it to the community. We told the community this is what we were planning on doing, that we were running a few tests for ourselves and we were going to run a few sessions. But we revealed what we were going to play before we actually started playing it. And in playing Legend of the Five Rings, which is there, we realized that, again, the mechanics were not what we were hoping for. We'll get into why in a bit, because that's going to dovetail into choosing the next campaign and what we're looking for and all that. But the issue that I have... Oh, yeah, we had a logo for Neo Rokugan. Yeah, we had a splash screen. I had created one. We released it. But there was another problem that we had with Neo Rokugan, which ended up being that we found that even though there were parts of it that we found exciting in terms of playing at a... table privately, on stream it was not going to be the same. It was Quinn's from Quinn's Quest, or previously from Shut Up and Sit Down, and also from People Make Games, who said it best. I'm probably paraphrasing here, but saying there's nothing quite so cringeworthy as seeing a bunch of white people shout about their honor in a setting that is meant to evoke a East Asian folklore thing quite directly. Like, Exalted is inspired by Eastern mythology, but it deviates quite a bit. Rokugan is very much supposed to be based quite a bit on Japanese folklore and the legends surrounding them, and also the concept of samurai and bushido. And I don't think these are bad concepts for anybody to play. I think it's weird if we had played that on stream. I think that when you play something on stream like that, first of all, it's there forever. Second, people can tune in and without any context can look at me, for instance, talking about my honor and my adherence to a code, and they can get the wrong idea. So I chickened out, is what happened. I think that I don't know whether any of the players are actually in the chat right now and they can weigh in, but I think that they could also agree the mechanics weren't where we wanted them to be either. So it made that decision a little bit easier. The reason why I felt badly is because we had basically got people excited. A lot of people really love Legend of the Five Rings, and not without reason. It is a very interesting setting, and it can be a very interesting game for a lot of different people. It depends on the edition that you're playing for mechanics. Some people swear by early editions before Fantasy Flight got a hold of it, but we got people excited, and then we pulled the rug out from under them. And that's understandably frustrating for people to deal with. Kung Fu Fenris, when you say that you're sending Scion to the same box, that's exactly why we're not considering Scion, which again, I'll get to, but Scion has the same problems. I don't think it's a problem for you to play at home and then deal with a bunch of different pantheons. I think it can be very weird if you're tuning into a stream and then seeing me start talking about Quetzalcoatl or even some of the more common, quote unquote, gods in North American culture, like, for instance, Thor. Some of these religions are religions that are still being practiced today. And I just was like, I don't want to publicly online stand forward and say, this is my interpretation of something that might be very important to other people. So, that's true, Kung Fu Fenris. We've had to have a bunch of people who came here due to L5R. But at any rate, so the end result is that we started playing Changeling again. We played Changeling Riverwild. Now, Changeling Riverwild was brought on because we were already current with the Changeling the Dreaming 20th Anniversary Edition rules, because we had been running an online version of that game, like a mass online version of that game for a while. And we had made some tweaks to that rules based on our observations for it, because even though I think 20th Anniversary is the best edition for it, I think a lot of it's still kind of busted, so I had made some changes. And the thing is, that didn't catch on. We played it for a while. Riverwild ended up running for how many episodes? 11, I think. So it ended up going for, a couple of months, but whether it was because we were kind of exhausted on Changeling or whether it was because the characters didn't quite click or whatever, we just sort of had to take a step back, slow down, and say, like, okay, that's not working for us either. We ended up moving on to Avatar, which we played and we enjoyed despite its mechanics. Its combat system, I think, is not fun, but we didn't need it. We kind of just played with the way it was, but also we learned that the mechanics in Powered by the Apocalypse type games, or Blades-like, gave us pause as well. So that didn't work out mechanics-wise, but still, that campaign we had quite a bit of fun with. We ended up playing 22 episodes of that, which is a pretty good campaign, I'd say. That's a long period of time. And then we played Werewolf, which we're still playing. So Werewolf, we have been engaged with for now almost 80 episodes, and that's our second longest running campaign. We're having a great time with it. But the thing about Werewolf is that we took our time. We took our time to check to see if it was a game that we wanted to play, to check to see if the mechanics were things that we wanted to do. We talked a lot about the kinds of characters that we'd want to play and how they would interrelate and interact. All of that stuff was important for us to say, okay, this is a game that we feel comfortable playing. And that means that it takes us time to figure out what we want to play next, because we're also aware that it's not just the four of us, but we're also taking an audience along for the ride. Audience that tune in directly, audience that watch on VOD. So there is that as well. Which game was it with the alt cast lineup? So that was Full Party. Full Party was not an RPGClinic game. That was a game that we didn't air on this channel. It aired on a different channel. I ran that with Scott and Elizabeth, along with two other players, Jesse and Amir. And then we also had Kate was running for a little while, but that campaign ended as well. Along with the channel. I don't believe it's currently active. But I don't really consider that an RPGClinic game, so it doesn't factor into these discussions specifically. Now, with all that said, knowing that we're trying to keep knowing that we're trying to keep a game going that we all enjoy playing, and that hopefully people enjoy watching, it means that we're become kind of careful. And so we will be testing games once we are to the point where we think we might end a game. So what does might end a game mean? Because that's also a little bit of a difficult question to answer right away. The problem with it is, let's say that we're playing Werewolf, and then we come to, like, we've been playing for a while now, and then we come to a point where an event happens and the players are like having a fantastic time, and then they decide to go out in a huge blaze of glory, and they end up sacrificing, or one of them ends up sacrificing themselves, and they die. And everyone's thrilled with this outcome, and they're like, that was a great story. The campaign is over effectively at that point. You might be able to get another session or two out of it with somebody having been dead. But the way that we play, once we've gone through 70 plus episodes, that's not the kind of thing that then a player can just add a new character in and then we can continue the way it is. At that point, it feels strange. We've never done that before, at least not on this channel, where somebody has died and then come in with a new character. And I'm not against it necessarily, but after such a long running campaign at that point, it feels a little bit maybe not. So this is the kind of thing that, because our characters, this is a minor spoiler for Werewolf. And when I say minor, I mean, this is an eventuality, not a huge big deal, and I'm not going to go into how it happened, but our player characters have, in Werewolf, there are two stats that you have to track, Harno and Hoglosk. And these are two... Beliefs is the wrong word. It's Harno is the kind of for werewolves, it's them giving up, them believing that the fight is no longer possible to win. There is no reason to continue to fight for Gaia. Whereas Hoglosk is that the fight is the only thing that's important, and that everything must fall by the wayside. The fight is the only thing that matters. And if you max out either of those stats, your player character effectively becomes unplayable, and the game is over for that character, either because you no longer fight or because you basically have become not mindless, but you've basically become such a zealot that you're committing atrocities in the name of what you believe in. So deprotagonized is a good way of putting it, yeah. I can start the queue. Hold on. There is a way to start the queue. There you go. There. So yeah, please put the questions in with !Q in advance. We have a different kind of bot system for clinic hours, unfortunately. Now, our players are starting to butt up against this level. They're not there yet, but when I saw that our player characters were starting to take more actions like this, I started to think, okay, it is possible that our players might at one point decide to do something that would cause one of the player characters to become unplayable, whether it's death or whether it's maxing out one of these stats. And therefore, if the players do something that then they're like, that was a great ending, or if I'm like, hey, I think that would be a great place to stop, then I don't want to force us to keep going because we don't have our next game chosen yet. Again, because we don't want to do 8 one-shots in a row while we try to figure out what we're playing next. So we start thinking about this in advance now. We don't do it right away. You know, in the first 10 episodes of Werewolf, we weren't worrying about what the next game is that we were going to play. But now we are starting to think about it, not because we have an end date, but because now we see that it is possible that the game may end at some point, and therefore we want to have an option. I can very much see this game continuing to play for quite some time. And I can also see this game ending in a few weeks, but I don't actually have that. We've discussed this as players together, and the conclusion that we reached is that we don't have a date yet. So whether it's sooner or far, we don't know. Doesn't mean that we're not going to check to see what we're going to be able to do for it, though. Okay. Now I also have to, where's my Q&A session here? There we go. There we are. Okay, cool. Sorry, it's new software for the questions. We used to have a very simple one, which I really liked, and that no longer works. And now I have another one, which is far more powerful, but it's also more complicated. So, yes, Mr. Rich, you can submit questions that aren't related to the new game. Absolutely. We may only get around to it a little bit later, but you can submit questions whenever you like. By all means. And of course, also, if you have a question and you know that you have to leave the stream, let me know and I'll see if I can divert and answer it on its way. All right, so Avatar of Cain wrote, I've been on a different schedule, though soon ending, so I'm looking forward to watching it come August, and so I've not been able to slot in the W5 game to my week as much. Is there anything about the experience that's influencing the kind of vibe that we're looking at next in contrast at all? Okay, so great question. Let's lead into it. How are we choosing the next campaign? The first thing that we are going to look at, obviously, is do we have things that we are excited about or things that we are absolutely against? And some of that is influenced by the game that we're just playing right now. If we were playing Werewolf, for instance, we're probably not going to have our next campaign be Werewolf. That's not a hard and fast rule, but I would say that, we tend to try to find games that are different enough from each other so that they have a different, perhaps, tone, different setting, not necessarily vastly different mechanics, but tone and setting are things that we like to play around with a little bit so that we're not always doing the same thing. So with Werewolf, we may not do a game that feels a lot like Werewolf next. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it is something for us to think about. We also know that we really enjoyed this game, and so that helps us because it starts to teach us things about the mechanics that we are enjoying right now. We've been streaming games for almost a decade at this point, so our tastes have shifted and changed. Remember, I started role-playing a long time ago, and when I started playing and I started running games and their designs had not matured to this point yet. I cut my teeth on D&D 2nd edition It was the first role-playing game that I spent a significant amount of time looking into, and I don't think I'd want to run D&D second right now, right? Like the games have changed. So we are a little bit kind of figuring out what we like. Now, Werewolf 5th Edition have mechanics that we really enjoy. There's an economy to rolling in this game, which we are enjoying, but it still has a satisfying amount of crunch. We really like brutal outcomes as a concept. We really enjoy the way that the game feels and plays. So that is something that we'll take into account, because there are other games that have similar mechanics. But it also has ruined us to a certain extent. Changeling is a game that is very near and dear to my heart. It is the game that I've spent the most time playing. It is absolutely a favorite of mine. And now I'm not so sure that I'd want to play it at the moment, because it does not have the mechanics that I would be looking for in a game. Period. Now, I could reverse engineer Werewolf 5th or Vampire 5th or whatever and try to apply it to Changeling. Some people have already tried, and I have been sent these things. I don't think anyone's done it to a point where I'm satisfied with it yet, and I have my own ideas, but that's a lot of work for me to undertake, time that I may not have to develop. So even though I really enjoy Changeling, the fact that its mechanics now feel out of date give me pause in choosing it. Not a disqualifier, but definitely something that makes me go, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure. Mistress has mentioned something that I think is actually really important to go at. The pandemic really changed all perspective of time. Even thinking it's been 5 years since that breaks my mind. Absolutely. But the pandemic also affected the way that we choose games. Scott and I were working on a project. This is, again, before a lot of life events occurred and before the pandemic occurred. We were working on potentially, with Kate, running Changeling the Lost as a LARP. And then the pandemic happened, and Changeling the Lost didn't really feel like a game that I wanted to play anymore. The Lost is very much a game about trauma, a game about somebody being absolutely broken and then finding solace in a community of like-minded broken people. And at the time when we were considering it, I was just like, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel good to me. It wasn't the sort of game that I wanted to play. So the pandemic can change things as well. Now, all that being said, we are, one of the things that we also have to take into account is what are the games that we don't want to play. So this is a more elimination style thing that we do, and it's because there are certain games that either we don't want to play or that we can't play. Famously, I don't enjoy Lovecraftian horror, for instance, right? Call of Cthulhu holds no interest for me at all. I'm just not that into it. And so I don't want to play that game for a long period of time, because the goal when we come up with these campaigns is that they are long running. Long running holds different definitions, and I'm not going to say that a game is a failure if it only runs for 10 sessions or 20 sessions, obviously not, but I know that I would not want to play Call of Cthulhu for longer than a couple of hours before I just want to back out and be like, it's just not interesting to me. The subject matter is not where we want to be at. So some of the reasons why we might eliminate a game is because that's just something that we're not interested in playing. We may not play a game because we can't play it, because it violates our lines, or it would be too difficult for it to overcome our veils. So one of our lines, or veils, I guess technically it's closer to a veil, but it's a very strong veil, is body horror. The reason why it's a strong veil is because in Werewolf you do transform into other creatures, but we don't go into detail about like how it's painful or how it's, self-destructive or anything like that. But because that is one of our veils, It means that there are certain games that we just will not consider playing. So one of the discussions that we were having on Discord is that we don't play horror games, and that's not quite true. There are elements of horror that we will play, like Werewolf has horror in it. That's not necessarily a disqualifier for us, but there are kinds of horror, such as body horror, that are just not things that we will play because we have one or more of us has said, this is not something that I want to roleplay online, or even this is not something I want to roleplay, period. And therefore, those games do not make the cut. This is important, I think, for a lot of people to consider and think about, because we have to keep in mind that everybody should feel comfortable at the table at all times. And therefore, we also have to have a situation whereby if a game feels like it would too often brush up against things that we have walled off, that are lines or veils, then that can make somebody feel anxious to play, even if people are, doing their best to not touch upon those things. So, as an example, one of our lines is that we do not make animals suffer if they are non-combatants, right? So no torturing puppies is a dismissive way of describing it, but it's a line that we all have agreed to, and I personally, I'm like, that's just fine. I don't need to torture puppies. Now, if there was a game in which torturing puppies was always a possibility, like let's say it was a game about folklore, and there was a creature who enjoyed torturing small animals. Well, even if I said, okay, well, we're going to play this game and this creature might show up, but probably not, and then the creature might not be doing these sorts of things, that could still make a player anxious because they associate that particular creature with something that they don't want to see in the game. And even reassurances that things have changed may not be enough. So that also can eliminate a game out of hand, because I don't want somebody to sit there worrying about whether or not they have to flash the safety card. That means that they're not focusing on having fun. So this is actually something that we ran into, as Kate had mentioned, during an episode of Changing the Streaming, they actually entered into a Black Spiral Dancer hive. The descriptions that I was giving was starting to make Kate nervous, because this was edging on a thing that she did not want to play. Now, we didn't cross those lines, but that's why we developed our safety cards. It was that episode, because we needed a tool to be able to say, this is going too far. Thing is, if I had made the entire game edging close to that line, then I can imagine that people just wouldn't be having fun doing it. So that is something else. So there are a couple of things there that I think are just, it's kind of like a natural for us to remember. We're not in the business of teasing at somebody's limits. We have our safety cards so that we can push our limits. But like, for instance, I wouldn't want to play Call of Cthulhu if someone said, don't worry, it's not that Lovecraftian. I'm like, but it's still something I don't like. Now, I don't like it just because it's not something that interests me. It's not that I have a specific problem with the content of it, but that's just as valid, right? Because the whole point of a game is to have fun. And if I'm not having fun, then what's the point? Okay. Lovecraftian, cosmic horror kind of falls into the same bed. It's like Mage the Awakening, not Mage the Ascension, but Mage the Awakening, where it also ended up being like eldritch forces. It's not interesting for me. It's just not what I'm interested in. This is also, when I watch, when people think about movie genres, I don't like horror as a genre. Suspense I can definitely enjoy. Thrillers I can enjoy, but straight up horror, no, because I don't connect with them at all. I'm not somebody who gets thrilled watching somebody try to develop horror through jump scares and creepy music and lighting. It just doesn't affect me on the same level. So I just get bored. Like, I remember a friend of mine showed me The Witch, if you remember that film, And I could appreciate elements of it. I could be like, okay, well, the cinematography is interesting and the acting is interesting, but I just don't give a fuck. So, and one of the things that we have to bear in mind is that just because we reject a game doesn't mean that we're saying the game is bad. We're saying that it's a game that's not for us. And in the same vein, then what we would request is that if somebody comes to us and says, well, your decisions are wrong because this game is good, is not something that we put up with either. So there's that as well. Thankfully, people who tend to act like that don't remain in the community for very long. Just because we have no interest in it, because we have a couple of priorities that we also look for when we choose a game. But the number one priority, aside from safety, is will we, the four of us, enjoy the game? Because if we were focusing on the stream, if we were trying to build a stream audience and then push our way towards becoming a partnered stream so that then we could develop a bit of fame and be able to move, we wouldn't be playing any of these games. We would play Dungeons and Dragons. Because those are the things that people like. When people look up actual plays, a lot of people will look up D&D. They won't think of any other role-playing game because they don't exist to them. So that's what we would play. But we're also not doing this because we're trying to become partnered or because we want fame for this. We like the community that we have. We enjoy playing. Now, we do care that people watch. We don't want to play something that nobody will watch, but we must play a game that we are personally interested in. Yeah, this is an automatic message that comes up. This software, the twitchat.fr, Kung Fu Fenders, this is what I can use for Q&A sessions and for highlighting, because the old one didn't do that anymore. Now, if I spent a lot of money, I can make sure that that message never shows up again, but see, now Scott does like Eldritch Horror a lot. He plays Arkham Horror. He plays paranormal games, right? Like Poly is some Paul Prospero games, those sorts of things, and those are great. He enjoys those. It is a regret of mine that I don't enjoy them because Arkham Horror seems like a game that I'd probably really like, but I can't get into the setting and I can't get into the narrative of it, so I just don't play. And that's how important that is to me. The mechanics can be super cool, but if the setting isn't something that I enjoy, I still won't engage with it. So I don't play Arkham Horror, even though I really like card games. So there's that. At any rate. Okay. I'm going to answer some of these questions because I think that some of what we're talking about may dovetail into them. Splooey had mentioned, okay, so here, Splooey wrote, Kate mentioned that she doesn't like horror as a focus of games, ruling out that genre. Are there any others that the group avoids due to themes requiring a customization for it to work at your table? So, horror's the big one. We also, as I mentioned earlier, we don't like genres that are very culture-coded to things where it might appear that we aren't treating that with the delicacy or with the attention that it deserves. So again, this is not to say that these games are bad, but it is to say that we have to be a bit careful because the environment of streaming is different than your home and private with your friends with no one else watching. Not only do we have people watch our games, but then they're posted online and they remain there in perpetuity. Even if we deleted the YouTube channel today, we don't know if somebody's downloaded these things and can re-upload them. All of our podcasts could have been downloaded. So this is an issue that I have run into for things like Scion, but even for games that I think are really cool, like Afrofuturist games or Coyote and Crow, or even the most recent example, and this is one that is closer to what we could potentially do, but Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which I think are all really cool games, and I think that they're worth your time. I don't know if I could run them on a stream, is kind of what it comes down to. L5R falls in that category as well. Again, not an issue with the setting. Think the settings are cool. Would love a chance to try them. Don't think I can do it in public. So those are themes that just won't work for us in terms of a stream. Now, I think that the makers of Coyote and Crow and the makers of Thirsty Sword Lesbians would tell you that they want people to play. That it's designed not just for people of a specific group, but again, online, it'd be tough. Now, Thirsty Sword Lesbians, it's a little bit different because our community is very queer friendly and we have queer players. So that helps. But also, I am not. I consider myself a staunch ally, but it means that I'd have to think about it before I'd be able to do it. And I do think that Thirsty Sword Lesbians would be one that I would probably be more comfortable playing, if only that then I have players present who can show that we're not just sort of adopting another culture and spotlighting it for yucks. But still not sure. Not for a stream game. Away from stream, I'd have no hesitation. So we have that to take into account. Yeah, I am not a lesbian. I am just a thirsty sword. Now, Spoolie also says, do you see those kinds of customizations as too complicated and not worth the attempt? So, no, I will customize games. It depends on the game, and it depends on what we're looking at. So I can customize mechanics. I am a game designer. I have been doing this for a while. I feel comfortable doing that. That's a question of time and effort. So there are things that I tweak about our games all the time. Because I might say, okay, we're playing werewolf. I'm not going to focus on this part and I'm going to take the whole thing and throw it away. I don't care about it. We did that with Changeling. Like the Thalain never really showed up in Changeling the streaming because that just was something that I'm like, no, doesn't fit for us right now, and that's fine. There are mechanics that we can change. I have changed mechanics in games a lot. And then some games, they deliberately say you choose the mechanics that you want, and so therefore that's what we do. So that's not a problem. But rewriting an entire customization can often be a daunting task. So there's a big difference between saying, I'm going to recontextualize a game that's already kind of generic versus a game like, say, Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk would be a very difficult game to spoof into a different genre because so much of it is surrounding the genre of Cyberpunk. So that one I might not choose for that reason. No, they did not need Thelians, not at all. Mr. Rich, I think that bi people can tell queer stories effectively, but yeah, rewrite it to bisexual badasses with broadswords. That sounds amazing. I'm down. All right. So yeah, customization, totally a possibility. Now, how much do I take into account funky mechanics such as non-standard dice, Jenga towers, etc. when choosing a game to play? Is it a factor or non-factor? It's absolutely a factor. I really enjoy non-standard mechanics like Jenga towers. Scott and I played Hunter Hunted, which involves a ring game, which... No, you can't quite see it. It's... No. It's in the wrong place in the calyx for you to be able to see, because the ring toss game is still there. Oh no, it's in the other room. Never mind. We really enjoyed that. I've played Dread, and we've played Star-Crossed, both of which use a Jenga tower. Great. But for long-running campaigns, those are difficult. The problem with a Jenga tower, obviously, is that once you knock it over, you have to build it back up again. And on stream, that can be downtime that you're not really that interested in. Non-standard dice are a gigantic pain in the ass. Now, technically, all these are using non-standard dice, right? Most people, when they think of a standard die, think of a six-sided cube, a D6. Werewolf and Vampire 20th anniversary, technically, you can buy dice that are specific to those games where they just don't have the numbers on them at all. And instead, they just have either successes, critical successes, or messy successes and stuff like that on the dice themselves. But they work very well with plain D10s, and that's how we play. We don't have the special dice for those. But Fantasy Flight these days feel like more of a dice company where they sell books as opposed to a book company where they sell dice. They love their extra peripherals, and I understand why. They are a high profit margin thing that they can sell. And it means that you can't just use your standard polyhedral dice. I don't like game-specific dice all that much. It would have to be a very good game for me to consider playing a game where I also had to invest in dice, considering that we have a lot of the Genesis and Star Wars FFG dice. We have a lot of those. We have collections of those because we played those. Genesis we never played on stream. We played a Genesis game off stream with a few friends of ours. But bluntly, those dice are a pain in the ass. They're not intuitive for us to play with. They look weird when you're playing with them, but the other thing is that it's difficult for the audience to understand. If we're playing Werewolf and somebody says, I rolled 6 successes, you kind of know what that means. If you say, I failed, you get it. If you say, I had a brutal outcome, you understand. If you say, I have 1 triumph, 3 successes, and 2 threat, well, that gets a little more complicated. And also, it's when you roll those dice, it's hard to kind of pick up on which symbols those are. We, in fact, when we played Star Wars, we just didn't end up, after a while, we just didn't end up using the dice at all. We just rolled using an online roller so that it would appear on screen so that players and audience could see it, because it was just easier to understand. And I don't know. Not a huge fan, I guess I'll say. It really does have to be something special for me to consider special dice. If it was something like most of your dice are normal, but one die might be a different one, then that's possibly something that I could consider. But also prevents piracy to an extent. I can't download L5R's dice. I mean, there are rollers that you can get which are free, which would do it all the same. And if you have Kate on your team, then she'll just program whatever the hell she wants, because that's how Kate be. But yeah, and you can create and craft dice. There are charts that they include in the book. They're like, look, if you don't have our dice, you can consult these charts, which was even worse. Ugh. It's like a bad UI in a video game. The more that the player has to struggle against understanding what's happening, the less they're focusing on having fun. That's true of video games, and it's definitely true of role-playing games. So we do take that into account. Funky mechanics can be cool, but they often are more suited towards one-shots. And we also have to take into account whether or not there's something that can slow the stream down. And non-standard dice are things that we try to avoid unless it's something really special, especially because if it's hard for the players or for the audience to understand, then that makes it harder for us to engage with. Now, Funky Mechanics, for instance, we're talking about potentially doing another Taskmaster stream. We've done that twice so far, both very well received. That's a lot of fun, but that also takes an incredible amount of prep, which is not something that we can do on a regular basis. So again, for some things, we absolutely love it. Can't do it all the time. Does the potential of a longer campaign fit into your choice of a game? Yes. We typically like to play games that run long because we like to play games with more intricate, funnily enough, storylines isn't what I would say, although I think we do like stories that have a little more complication to them. It's actually, I think, the emotional content of the story that people are more curious about. Things like personality interplay and character growth and character development and not just for PCs, but also for NPCs. And so if a game is like, look, it plays for like 5 sessions and then it's done, that doesn't mean that we won't play it, but it means that we may not consider it for a main campaign game. This is part of the reason why we bounce off Blades in the Dark. Blades in the Dark is an excellent game. I have nothing against Blades in the Dark. And I think that it's a game that I would recommend to a lot of people, but it's designed to chew through characters. And if that's the case, it becomes something that's less interesting for us because we don't want to have character growth that only takes 4 sessions to reach its conclusion. The other thing is that mechanics are something that we look at, because if you run long enough and then all the characters kind of max everything out, then that's a game that we might not consider as well. So when we played Avatar, when we got to a certain point, all the characters felt the same because they just bought all of the damn things that they could buy. There was nothing left to buy in the experience. And the characters are also at that point designed that the things that made them feel different, like their stats, all the stats kind of equalized. So not great for a long-running campaign. Not a problem, but it is for us if we're looking to run a long campaign. My players really like to see their characters grow, but not to the expense of, well, then what's the point? So there's that as well. So yes, we always do take that into account. Let's close that. All right. Let's try somebody else here. Let's go for Osab. Osab wrote, aside from Legend of the Five Rings, have there been any systems and or settings that are considering modifying to meet our needs, but ultimately abandoned? There are settings that we're considering right now to modify that we haven't abandoned, that we think we might actually use. But that was the big one. That was the big one that we chose and then discarded. There have been thoughts surrounding it, but those are things that we have not abandoned, and so I can't talk about them because I don't want to talk about games and get people excited about them until we're ready for the audience to start hearing about it. Remember, it has to pass muster with the players first. So if I say, this is an example that we're not currently considering, but if I say, I'm really interested in playing a game that is set in the Wild West, but that uses the Pathfinder rule set, I don't want to mention that and then have players be like, oh man, Wild West Pathfinder, without having the players actually react to it first. So I won't talk about that at the moment. But yeah, L5R was the big one. Yeah, so as Mr. says, Avatar and Powered by the Apocalypse games are meant to be short, or you're supposed to hit your growth and retire the character and pick a new sheet, which is not the kind of game that we want to play. Turns out. That's okay, though. That was kind of fun that I tend to work in long arcs. Thrones counter to PBTA's looser plot framework, and the PC advancement seems to work alongside that plot structure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Storyteller games are very popular within RPGClinic. Besides Mage, are there any other storyteller-style games that we want to avoid? And are any that I kind of wish that we could play for stream, even there's a big asterisk? Okay, let's talk about storyteller system games. We're not talking about story path system games. Story path, so that's things like Scion or Trinity, that's released by Onyx Path. Those games are not, I don't consider them storyteller games. They're based on the storyteller system, but they're not storyteller. And I will say, right now, I'm not a huge fan of Storypath. I haven't tested it extensively, but not a huge fan of those. And also, to be honest, the games that it tends to be attached to are not games that I am thrilled with. So it's not like I've been like, oh man, there's a game that I totally would have played except it's Storypath, so I won't. Right? Like Scion, a game that I think is really cool, is not being considered mostly because of its cultural implications, not because of its systems. But there are a few games in the World of Darkness. So we'll start with that, because the storyteller system, so if we go to the storyteller system, so storyteller system has several different games. There are tweaks to these. So things like Mind's Eye Theater, those are live action role-playing game things which are based on storyteller system, but then changes things to make it easier for people who are just running around using their hands. Then there's Onyx Path, who took a second edition of all the Chronicles of Darkness and then changed those things. Story Path is part of it as well. But the storyteller system are games that essentially are World of Darkness and Exalted are the core. Now, for World of Darkness, there's a couple of different ones in here. So there's Vampire, the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Hunter the Reckoning, Mage the Ascension, Mummy the Resurrection, Demon the Fallen, Wraith the Oblivion, and Changeling the Dreaming. Okay, few things. There's a few that we can probably eliminate right off the bat based on design questions. So Mummy has not had a recent update to it that would make it interesting to play, and it was always kind of janky anyway, so we're probably not playing Mummy. Demon the same way. Wraith is a game that I think is fascinating, but its subject matter is pretty rough, and I'm not sure that it would be something that I'd be super interested in playing, but also it doesn't have a 5th edition equivalent, nor does Changeling. The storyteller system games, I prefer games that have advanced a little bit further. Like I said, when we played 20th Anniversary Edition, we had a great time with it. It's our longest running game. We love it. But at this point now, it feels janky to us because we've played 5th. And yes, as Chandra says, Wraith would trip over our veils and lines, like a lot. So if we're dealing with 5th edition, that leaves us with Vampire, Werewolf, and Hunter. Mage. So I'm going to talk about Mage for a second, just to because people have heard different things. I ran a Mage LARP for years. A LARP. Made it work. Mage is a lot of fun. And I think that there's some parts of it that I think my players would adore. There is one key part of Mage which I hesitate to therefore say we should play this, and that is, in fact, player choice paralysis. Mage is a game where you can do so many different things. You can do so many different effects, and it's great for that. It's wonderful. It's a lot of fun, but it takes a long time. You have to negotiate. What spheres do you have to use in order to apply an effect? Is it vulgar or is it coincidental? The storyteller has to weigh in. And this is a negotiation that can take a little while. If you're playing in a 6-hour game and you're just sort of hanging around, then that can be fine. If you're playing in front of an audience, you start feeling time pressure and you start feeling like you don't want dead air. And then you have the audience that starts to give suggestions, and then it gets tough. When players have a lot of choices in what they can do, it takes them longer to decide how to do it, and we already feel pressure on stream to not take too much time. I mitigate this by bouncing around a lot. I bounce between players in the middle of combat, for instance, so that if I see that somebody needs some time to think, then I go to somebody else and I resolve their shit instead, so that I can go back after they've had time to think. But for Mage, this sort of thing can take quite a while to figure out. Now, if the rules have simplified in an eventual 5th edition for Mage, it would be something that we would consider. If it was done in such a way that then players could feel like they didn't have to try to beat the clock whenever they tried to figure something out, and that they didn't have to argue with the chat every time they tried to do something. Because here's something else. Our community is wonderful. We love them, and we really like playing. And every once in a while, we'll get things wrong and the chat will point it out, and that's very appreciated. But sometimes the chat points out things that we aren't necessarily doing wrong, we're just doing them differently. We're doing them the way that we want to do them. And it's appreciated when somebody is trying to help us play the game the way that it's intended. And we don't have a problem with anybody bringing stuff up at this time. But it can be frustrating when we have chosen to play a game in a certain way and then somebody else fights us on it. Again, it hasn't happened recently. But with Mage, I imagine it would happen constantly if we had a lot of people tuning in. They would be, chat is the annoying paradox that messes with your cool magic stuff. And it is not because chat's trying to do something bad. It's not people acting in bad faith. It's because they're excited about the game and they want to see it played the way that they recognize, or they want to be helpful. 90% of the time, that help is actually really appreciated. 10% of the time, we grit our teeth a little bit and we move on. But if it happened all the time, as we think it would with Mage, that would be an issue. So if the rules fix that in 5th, then it's absolutely a game that we would consider. Not for sure, but we'd consider it. But until that time, I don't want to be staring my players down and say, it's your turn, what do you want to do? And then they have to think for 10 minutes about how they're going to build an effect while chat's waiting and possibly suggesting. So, half moon adornment for chat, much like the peanut gallery. Yeah, there you go. All the moons on the layout. That might be interesting. We could talk to Kate about that. We'll see. That's an interesting thing. Although we wouldn't call you the peanut gallery. The peanut gallery I've learned only recently because my mother actually was once in the peanut gallery for a taping of Howdy Doody back in the day. But the peanut gallery is actually a racist term. Didn't know this, but it is. So I tend not to use it anymore. Anyway, Mr. says, I think if Mage went with something almost like Changelings Invoke the Dreaming, where you say, I want this to happen, you roll based on spheres, and then it can fail, work, or work too good. Yeah, that, we could potentially have that perfectly well. Yeah, Kung Fu Fighters, I only found this out very recently myself. So, I don't think you, no blame, I don't think you meant anything by it at all. But yeah, I didn't know until recently. So for Mr. I think the term that you're looking for is unleashing. I think that's specifically what you're looking for. So the term peanut gallery was, if you check it out on Wikipedia, it's a nickname for the cheapest and ostensibly rowdiest seats in a theater. The occupants were known to heckle the performers, and so therefore they often were served peanuts because that was the least expensive snack, and they would throw the peanuts sometimes to heckle. But the thing is, the term owes its origins to the United States' segregated South as a synonym with the back seats or upper balcony where black members of the audience sat. Now, it is disputed, this racial element, but it's close enough that I avoid the term. At any rate, so that leaves us with Hunter, Werewolf, and Vampire, if we're looking for 5th edition specifically. Werewolf we've just played. We're unlikely to play Werewolf again so soon. Hunter, I don't think is a fully baked product. I was surprised to see it come out so quickly. It came out before the Vampire. It came out before Werewolf 5th. But the core of it is that it's humans who have become aware of the existence of the supernaturals, and they fight them, which is fine, but the theme of the game is a bit not where I would want to go, personally. That edges a little too much on either horror specifically, which is something that we edge away from, just as like a straight horror, or it edges on monster hunting. Literally, the game is called Hunter, and that provides a little too much focus on something that I just don't find as interesting to play. Hey, Lydia. Hunter, they don't advertise because it's just a half-baked product. Like if you read the book, I own it, and I've looked at it. It's okay, not really. It doesn't provide interesting enough stuff for players to do, I think. One of the things that we look for in a game that my players really look for, that I look for as well, is that we want to have crunch. We do not want super simple games. We want crunch. We want stuff to tweak and identify with and play with. But we don't want it to be too complicated, and we also don't want it to be not complicated enough. And there just isn't enough, I think, for players to grab onto in Hunter. So it isn't thrilling for us. Avatar of Cain, when you say that you remember seeing some speculations that it was schedule filler, that's exactly what I think it was, which is why I think it was rushed out the door. So there's that. Hunter 5th is a poor man. It's a poor man copy of Chronicle of Darkness's Hunter, which is, yes, monster hunting. So Chronicles of Darkness is also not 5th edition. Chronicles of Darkness is Onyx Path. These include things like Werewolf the Forsaken, Vampire the Requiem, Changeling the Lost, Mage the Awakening. So these are also games that are available, and some of them are quite popular. We have people who really enjoy those games. So there's two issues that we have right now with it. And here I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to say that this is me talking. No one else, just me, not my players at all. So yeah, Chronicles of Darkness belongs to White Wolf because they're licensing it, but Onyx Path are the ones who are doing it right now. Here's the thing. Again, just for me. I'm not thrilled with Onyx Path at the moment. I don't really want to engage with their games a ton. That's not an overriding concern. It's not like I'm saying I'm never going to play Exalted again or anything like that. But I have been burned by Onyx Path, and I'm not feeling thrilled about it for a few different reasons. I am not a huge fan of their business model. I get really frustrated that when it comes to Kickstarters, they just seem like they're trying to power them out as quickly as possible and then delay actually releasing the game for as long as they possibly can. Not thrilled with that. At one point, we were in touch with them for while we were playing Exalted about cross promotion. We're not a huge thing, but Exalt Switch Nexus I think is still one of the games that is most popular in terms of people rewatching. Same with Academy, same with again, not an RPGClinic product, but Full Party. So I've been in touch with them, but they seemed very uninterested in us playing Exalted and way more interested in playing one of the properties that they own instead, which I guess, sure, they might be interested in, their line of games, but none of them were ones that we were all that interested in. And so therefore we kind of felt like we were dropped at that point. They just didn't care about us. And the most that they ever did was insert a link to our game in the very bottom of their newsletter, which I don't think anybody read. And I would be surprised if a single person actually tuned into one of our streams because of links in their newsletter. And they were kind of treating it like it was a big deal. I had to constantly keep them up to date, apprised. It was a lot of work for me to deal with them, and we got nothing out of it. So I'm not huge on Onyx Path at the moment. I'm not, there are people who have worked on Onyx Path who I still think are really cool. I don't blame anybody who wants to play Onyx Path games, and I'm not saying that this is a boycott or me encouraging anybody not to play these things. I'm saying that me personally, I'm feeling a bit raw. So it's something that I don't know, dude. I'm not sure I'm going to be playing an Onyx Path game in the near future. Exalted is the one exception, which we may or may not, because it's a game that is near and dear to our hearts. But there's that. So Lydia, we did play Blades in the Dark. Scott ran a mini campaign of Blades in the Dark, which we had fun with, but Blades in the Dark is antithetical to the kinds of games that we want to play, which are long running with a lot of character development. Blades in the Dark is a meat grinder designed to chew up characters and spit them out. So there's that. Yeah, that's so weirdness. That's a very good way of kind of putting it out there. It feels like there's constant like, hey, let's get things kickstarted, and then I feel like I've been giving a lot of money to them and then just not seeing the result for a long time. And if it happened once, I'd understand, right? Like Exalted 3rd Edition took a pretty long time and there were some extenuating circumstances, and I get it, but it's all of them at this point, and it's just really frustrating. This is a baller campaign and convinced me I wanted to play Exalted 3rd instead of worried I'll never play this, just like I'll never play 2nd. Well, that's kind. That's great to hear. So Bardic Lydia, since you guys like crunch, what's the vibe on Cyberpunk Red? It's way too crunchy for not enough. I'm actually not a huge fan of the mechanics of Cyberpunk. It's very, very complicated as a game, for not a lot of benefit, in my opinion. Now, for some people, they super enjoy that. And by all means, at that point, go for it. But Cyberpunk also has themes that are somewhat nihilistic in a lot of ways. Again, not necessarily bad, but those themes aren't necessarily ones that I'm interested in exploring right now. The thing about a cyberpunk or near future setting, those I'm still quite interested in. I think those are neat. We're considering them, but I'm not sure it'll be Cyberpunk Red. Yeah, if they're trying to game the system of crowdfunding, then that to me shows like that's a bad bad sign. Kung Fu Fenris, I'd be interested in your thoughts on Cyberpunk then, now that you're playing it. The My Little Pony RPG, never say never. I know way too much about My Little Pony. For a long time, I watched quite a bit of it because this was like 15 years ago. But 15 years ago, I was in a situation where I had a friend who had a medical condition that meant that they weren't moving around a whole lot. They'd often watch a lot of television. In order to feel better, they'd watch My Little Pony. So I watched a lot of My Little Pony. So I know a bunch about it. And I think it's cool. Not sure that it would be the sort of thing that we would play. But I think it's a cool game. Do think it's a cool game. At any rate, let's take a look at some of the other questions that we have here. So actually, let's just go back to this one. So again, so no hunter. Then what about vampire? Maybe. The thing about vampire, there's two things right now that we have to consider about vampire. The first is it's set in the same setting as werewolf. So maybe we'd want a change of setting, and therefore vampire may not be the next game that we'd want to play. The other thing, and this was mitigated somewhat, is that in old versions of vampire, they made it very clear. Vampires do not love. They are incapable of love to a certain extent. Now that has been since changed. But the thing is, my players really, really like collecting NPCs. Not necessarily just to doink them or to fall in love with them, but also because they just like being friendly. They like gathering little communities. And in Vampire, communities like this are very cutthroat. So I'm not sure whether that's something that they'd want to engage in as much, because then it's harder to my players like to joke about how they want to bang one person of every splat, right? So we have to get somebody from every tribe, somebody from every auspice, somebody from every kith. And in Vampire, I'm not so sure if that's going to be a thing for that. Now, there is a romance book for Vampire that came out, so that sort of helped to mitigate this. But Vampire is still a game where basically you're against other vampires. in large part. So we would have to do a lot of sitting down and talking about it to consider whether or not we would be able to find a game that we would have fun playing in Vampire. We have played Vampire before. All of us. We've had some fun with it, but it wasn't like 30, 40, 50, 60 episodes fun with it. I used to play in Vampire LARPs, which was fun, but LARPs are often, not always, but often by their nature, more PvP endeavors, and so therefore it was fun for that. I just don't know whether that's something that my players would kind of want to see, but we would find out. We would see. And so, Bardic Lydia, I don't think any of our players are squeamish about blood. I don't think that's the case. Like, we've all played Vampire. It hasn't been an issue. If there's anything that people have highlighted, I don't know if this would still be a problem, but for a while, one of the things that people highlighted as they didn't like so much in Vampire was the discipline of dominate. The idea of the non-consensual being able to just point at somebody and say, do this. Now, I think that might have been mitigated somewhat. I think that people also understand that that is a thing that people use specifically in dire situations, or that they know that there's ethical ramifications for it. I forget whether this was discussed before or after Elizabeth's character in Changeling the Streaming learned Sovereign, which has a lot of the same themes of being able to force somebody to do something against their will. And I don't know if that would still be an issue anymore. I'd have to talk to them about it, but there's that. There's also things like dementation, which we'd have to talk about as well, because I am not a huge fan of the way that mental illness is portrayed in a lot of role-playing games. And dementation is kind of a very specific sort of form of that. I don't think that it'd be a no-go, but I think we'd have to talk about it and decide what it meant, because there's also things like Malkavians in Vampire. Malkavians, in some editions, are described as like, you're insane. And in others, they're described as, you have a unique viewpoint that means that you always will be a bit off from everyone else. We'd have to decide what that meant too. So Vampire's not off the table, but I'd have to see if the themes are ones that would resonate with players, because they like their Pokeballs, where they capture all the NPCs and get to keep them and hug them and snuggle them and touch them and give them mouse kisses. So mouth kisses, not mouse kisses. We're not playing Mouse Guard. Not yet, anyway. So there's that. Soldier Loon. Soldier Loon's fun. I think Liz actually got a copy of, I forget the name of it, like In Moonlight or something, which is very much a Sailor Moon thing game. Dementation is now a single ability that you have to opt into with a combo of several powers in fifth. It's no longer its own thing. Okay, Girl by Moonlight, that's it, yeah. Good, because that's fine. I mean, I'm also somebody who got brought up by people who were very much against what they called teddy bear Malkavians, which I've spoken about sometimes here. Malkavians that were like the kind of people who would just like show up at a LARP, and all they would do is be like, they'd act like children. They'd carry around a teddy bear, in essence, and just not... They were more interested in just trying to play somebody who was insane, as opposed to trying to play the game as somebody who had a twisted mind outlook, and that just made everyone else's life kind of miserable. But that's not something I'd really be worried about with our players. Because the whole point of the character that you're trying to play is, I just want to play somebody who's weird. At that point, I'd say you need to have more than that, because... that's not enough to base a 60-episode campaign on. So there's that. So Vampire's not off the table, but Vampire has some hurdles to overcome before we would play it. Kung Fu Fenris asks, would you consider a game that works with legacy aspects, like Pendragons, where you eventually play children of the characters who might have died? That's possible. I think that that's not as likely, but it's not out of the picture. That would be something that if players were curious about it, then that would be something that we could examine. The real thing is that if they can't capture their NPCs, then they just will be sad. So I am understanding of that, and I admit that I also like the interpersonal play of that, but the thing about playing generational games is that you reset those naturally. You have a shared history, which is really cool, but the relationship's still reset. Mistrich asks, do you have any settings or genres that you really want to hit, like historical, fantasy, sci-fi, cyberpunk, etc., like any mood striking you in particular? Nier Rokugan was exciting enough for us that that's something that I would like to see, but we'd have to find the right game for it. We would have to figure out what we were going to do to work in that sort of situation, which would be fun. Historical is not something that I have a whole lot of interest in. Fantasy, we've played fantasy. We probably will again. Adventure. Science fiction absolutely is something that I could consider. One of the things, though, is that our basis in science fiction is different. We tried Star Wars Reach. We're not doing that again. But for instance, people have brought up Star Trek. Kate and I are Star Trek fans. Liz and Scott are not. And I think it's mostly just due to lack of exposure more than anything else. So if we were to play a Star Trek game, they would have to catch up on Star Trek. At least some of it, for us to consider that as a game that we'd be interested in playing. But I'd also have to look at the mechanics. I haven't gone in depth. It's been a while since I've taken a look at Star Trek Adventures. Walking Dead would be too horror-y, I think. Zombie games. One of the things that I'll say also, when it comes to horror, is that often the point of horror is to say, man is the real monster, and I'm just tired of that as a genre in a lot of ways. And The Walking Dead is exclusively that as a message. So I'm not sure that I'd be interested in wanting to play that personally, but I think it also would smack a bit too much of body horror for us to consider it. Again, I think that these are great. I think people can enjoy them. They're just not for me. All right, let's see. Don't forget that you can use !Q and then a space before your message, and it'll populate in my queue, so I'll be able to easily more pick them out. What about the other Essence 20 system games like Power Rangers, Transformers, G.I. Joe? I have to admit, I have no experience with any of these three things. I've seen a Transformers movie. I've watched maybe one episode of Power Rangers in my life, and I've never seen anything G.I. Joe. So I would have to catch up on those. And because I'm the one who's likely going to be running the next long-term campaign, that means that I have to be the most versed in it. Not necessarily the most versed in it, but it means I have to be well versed in it. And I just don't have a lot of time to watch a lot of Power Rangers on the chance that I might be interested in playing it. I just don't have a lot of time for that, unfortunately. They'd have to watch all Trek episodes, all shows. I haven't even seen all Trek episodes, all shows. So no, they absolutely would not. But good on you for bringing that up. Fallout RPG. I'm not a huge fan of post-apoc. I mean, technically we are kind of playing a post-apoc game right now, but Fallout's, again, it can be quite a nihilistic setting, and I don't know if after Werewolf I want to play something nihilistic. Maybe. It's an option. I don't know how much Fallout experience Kate has. I know that Liz and Scott have played through Fallout games before. Shout out to Fisto. And I think we've all seen the Fallout television series, which we enjoyed, but I'm not sure that that's something that people are super excited about, but maybe. Get to work. There are certain episodes of Star Trek I'm not watching. Yeah, we are technically playing a post-apoc game. All right, Avatar of Cain says, I want to say I remember you being interested in Daggerheart when that hit beta. Have you kept up with it all in terms of interest there? Daggerheart is a game that we are examining. We are taking a look at that, there's a few things about it that I am definitely excited about, specifically also the idea of campaign frameworks. So Daggerheart is a game that is built on the ability to say, this is the kind of game we want to play. And the mechanics have ways to justify various different ways to interpret things. Magic can be technology, for example, or you want to set things in the Old West, you can. You want to set things in space, you can. You just have to come up with a campaign framework for it, and the mechanics are sort of built around that. So that's an advantage. The things that are giving me a little bit of pause, there's only 9 level ups in the game. You start at level 1, you end at level 10, and after that there is no more leveling. So we'd have to find a way to make that work. Now, I'm not that concerned about that in terms of like, I can just slow down progression to make it so that players don't like accelerate. They say 3 sessions between each level is a minimum, and that would give us about 30 sessions, which, you know, that's a decent sized campaign. We might extend that if we decide that we want to play Daggerheart so that we can extend it and have a longer campaign. But I am a little concerned. I just want to make sure that my players will feel like they can have unique feeling characters for them, and that they have ways to manipulate them and treat them as fun. I think that the mechanics are interesting, but I'd have to play them. I have not played it. But we are looking into Daggerheart. It is a game that we are actively considering. Scott romancing alien babes on Star Trek. If Scott plays the Riker character, I'd be so happy. I'd be so happy. So, Mistress, you saying that even at level 1 you feel like you have a lot of options, and players said that they enjoyed that they didn't feel like level 1 D&D characters, like they were powerful already. I think part of that is just because it's a better onboarding. And part of it is that, yeah, you do get to start. You're not like... A lot of D&D should basically run under the assumption that you're not starting at level 1, that you're starting at a higher level. The thing that I'm mostly curious about is how much experience has come into play in the game, and how do players feel about that? Because one thing that I'll say about storyteller system games, which we love and we play a lot of, is that I would estimate 50% or more of the roles that we ask for are like the same 3 things, like wits insight or wits awareness or strength brawl, right? Like these things happen constantly. So experience, like the fact that you don't have so many options to choose from may not matter as much, as long as experiences make it feel like you get to customize a little bit. So there's that. I'm curious as to how that would appear for our players. An Assassin's Creed role-playing game coming out eventually. I have another reason to avoid Assassin's Creed. I live in Montreal and I'm in the video games industry, and there's a chance that one day I may end up working at Ubisoft, and therefore I don't want to play an Assassin's Creed role-playing game. There's a difference between playing Assassin's Creed on a stream, but then also being like, I've made my own stories in Assassin's Creed, and all it would take is for somebody to then go back and look at the VODs and figure that out, and then watch what I did. And even if that's not what I would have intended for an audience at large, I don't want them to look at that and then discover it like that. So that's just a work question for me, even though I currently have no plans to leave my current studio. But you got to be a little careful. You never know who you might end up having to work for. Dex Insight, I think we'll try to have at some point. Konku Fenris, for sure. Yeah, Dio, I also got to say, I'm so glad to see you, Dio. It is something that I am aware of, and that I just have to keep in the back of my mind. It's why I stream a lot of retro games, because that's kind of harder to tie into current things. One of the things that I learned when I was working for Nintendo is that they said, we don't, like, when I joined Retro Studios, they had only just started to allow employees to stream. Before that, you weren't allowed, period. And then they were like, okay, you can, but you're not allowed to say anything negative about a video game while you're streaming. because we don't want to make it seem like you are representing the company and saying something wrong. I think that since has been relaxed. I think they've kind of realized that there's only so much that you can do about that kind of thing. But that's something that I have taken into account. I'm not interested in screwing my future employment over this. Now, I'm not stopping this stream. Like if I joined a game company and they said you have to stop doing your Sunday role-playing streams, it would have to be a fantastic offer for me to even consider it, because this is important for me. So, Bardic Lydia, are Warhammer games or all R. Telsorian's Witcher games also in the nihilism bucket? I have no experience with The Witcher at all. I have not seen the television show. I have not played the games. I have not read the books. Warhammer as a universe does not interest me. It's a little too grimdark for me. A little too edgy. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, but like also nihilism is in there. Both great properties. I just have no experience in them. Streaming is one way in which actors get an opportunity to perform on their own. It's actually a large reason why I'm doing it. I don't get to perform at all anymore. I tried to juggle it for a little while, and then it became very clear that I couldn't work in the video game industry as a designer. I'm no longer a designer at this point. Now I'm a director, but I can't work as a designer and work as a performer at the same time. Just, it isn't possible. So one of the things that I do in order to satisfy that creative itch for me is this, which is a lot of fun. And it kind of makes me feel like I still get to perform for an audience, even if it's on my own terms and on a channel, which, you know, I'm not going to reach billions with this, but that's okay. I will continue talking about this, but Mr. left a question early on, and I do want to get to it because I don't want to leave it behind. So we'll pause on the topic for a second. This is something that's tangibly related to the power level, which is why it came to mind. Have you ever had a game hit that point before you felt like you'd had a satisfying story? And if so, how do you handle that? My players are approaching E4, and I'm like, damn, they've really gone for a lot of very small things, and there hasn't been a real big ongoing plot. How would you handle that, or have you had that happen? So, yes, it's happened. It's happened on stream, and I can tell you my experiences with it. Some of it is not nearly as much of a problem as you need to worry about, and some of it is. So in Werewolf the Apocalypse right now, players have advanced in a long way. Like, they've gone up high in renown, they've bought a lot of abilities, they've bought gifts, and then technically in game, it's only been going on for a couple of months because of the way that the game has run, because of my players' habits and my own. They like to spend sessions where they just talk to NPCs for a while, and okay, well, that's great, but that means that they will often spend several sessions on one in-game day. And every once in a while, people make a joke about it. And they're like, ha ha ha, remember, it's only been 2 weeks. Ha ha ha. It turns out that you've become one of the most well-respected werewolves in the world, but it's only been a couple of months. And you have to think about this along certain lines. Narratively, I can justify it by saying that renown isn't necessarily tied to age, and that renown can fluctuate. And also player characters are supposed to be super cool. And also, I don't give a fuck. So all of those things can be valid. I can hand wave and shrug and be like, we're playing the game that we want to play, and that's just the way it is. And then you just deal with it. There is a problem, however, when it comes to sometimes if you get too powerful before the story wraps up, and then you find that you cannot effectively challenge players without it being way too swingy. So swingy, if you are as powerful as a god, then the only people who can take you on either are gods or they have to be stronger than gods. Not exclusively, but let's just say that as a general rule for the moment. If that's the case, well, then it becomes very difficult to balance encounters. Not impossible, but difficult. And then if you start being like, well, I was telling a story about a local kingdom with, an army that was of middling size and a king who had a little bit of power, and I was hoping that people would resolve the storyline when they were still Essence 1 or Essence 2, but now they're Essence 5, and they should be able to level the castle by simply speaking 3 words aloud. Well, then that's an issue. Your story has to therefore drive up the threat, drive up the opposing force beyond where maybe you think it's reasonable for the story you wanted to tell. And that is an issue if you're not telling the story that you want. In which case, it's also hard to roll back, because telling your players, well, I have to take away 90% of the experience you earned because you're too damn strong for the campaign that I'm wanting to run, they don't really react to that too well, and I understand why. In that case, you kind of have to take the L. You have to either modify the story that you're hoping to tell, or you got to be honest with your players, say, you've exceeded the point where I feel comfortable running the story, and we have to try something else. You can discuss this with your players. It's okay to do that. I advocate for game masters, storytellers, DMs, whatever you want to call yourself, to not put yourself at the top of a mountain and then never talk to your players and feel like you have to solve all the problems on your own. I am not Evan, and I do not want to be Evan. He is a fictional character, and I am not Team Evan. I've had people come to me and be like, oh man, I really resonate with Evan. And I'm like, you shouldn't. He's not a good person. Anyway, so if this is a situation that you're finding yourself in right now, I acknowledge that you have a problem. You have to acknowledge that you have a problem and that it needs a solution, and you have to talk with your players about it if you don't have the solution yourself. And that's okay. But if they're really enjoying the game and the characters that they're playing, wrap the storyline up quickly, but then you have to like kick it into overdrive and then put a bigger opposing force at them. And then eventually you have to understand that characters will age out of games, right? There's a reason why most D&D games don't hover around level 20. At that point, characters are ridiculous, and ridiculous characters need ridiculous threats, and ridiculous threats are hard to manage. So there's that. Bardic Lydia, I'm not sure what you mean by a classic World of Darkness game. Like, what do you mean by a classic World of Darkness game? Do you mean like not 5th edition, like a 20th anniversary edition or a revised edition? Do you mean the Chronicles of Darkness, pre-5th edition? Yeah, that's still the same setting. They're all the same setting. They're all modern fantasy games. Again, that's not a disqualifier, but that is something that we take into account. That's a matter of, are we still interested? Because like, for instance, Changeling Riverwild, we set that in Ottawa instead of Montreal because I wanted to shake things up. I also I wanted to very deliberately point out these characters are not in the same place as the Changeling the Streaming universe, because it was ostensibly the same universe. But I didn't want them to be like, oh, every day I'm just going to encounter the same characters all over again. I wanted to make sure that it was different. And Riverwild, we bounced. So that's a question mark. Was it because it was too similar? Was it because Ottawa was not a great setting, even though Ottawa is actually the birthplace of 2 of us? But I haven't spent a whole lot of time in Ottawa, so maybe I wasn't doing a very good job of echoing another city. It's a question mark. Mr. Rich, do you have suggestions for making the story escalate like that for them to match when there's not much seating for it? I think that's my fear. Who is this mystery final boss who appeared? Anybody can be manipulated. Anybody can be serving somebody else, but also you can have the characters win the current storyline, and that attracts attention from other people. If you manage to, again, I don't know what the plot of your story is, you manage to conquer a small kingdom because your characters overthrow whoever the current ruler is and they install themselves. Well, then that might get attention from somebody else who's like, who's this upstart who cannot do a kingdom? Well, now they might upstage me if they've sniffed around. Or they could say, hey, I found out that you have specifically done things that trouble me. Now I'm coming after you. So there's ways to do it. Either your current enemies, there's another stage above. That's a thing. There's you have attracted notoriety, and so now therefore other people are interested in you, or you just start another story in the same universe. You know, a different enemy who's unrelated, who's doing a different thing. Those are possible. Ask your players what they might be interested in. We may have been full on changeling from Disconcordia. So Disconcordia also taught us that, like Disconcordia was also very much a child of the pandemic, a child of the work that, like when we started Disconcordia, I had a lot more time because I was working a job where I wasn't needed. It didn't need my focus all the time. So I had a lot of free time, and therefore I was a lot of time to dick around in Disconcordia and help out. When I lost that time, it became harder and harder for me to participate. But also, it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and there's a huge emotional toll to it. We haven't done a whole lot of talking about it, but there were several times at Disconcordia where we were asked to basically be authority figures, parents, and figures of authority when that's not something we really wanted to show up for. We had people that we had to adjudicate against. We had arguments that we had to resolve. We had hurt feelings. We had people who were violating our lines and veils, and we had to do something about that. We had bans. All of that stacks up. All of it adds up. So after a while, it just ended up being something not sustainable if we didn't have the time. And I no longer had the time. So everything that I was dealing with, I had to shunt off to other people, and that's not fair either. Yeah, they killed Zydak. Yeah, they did. So the thing about changeling in a timepiece, possible. I'm not a huge fan of historical, personally. Like, I imagine that my players might be more interested in it, but like, if you tell me, oh, we're going to set a game in like the 1930s, well, that, first of all, that also means a lot of investment in time for me. Because that means that I have to become much more familiar with the time period that we're doing. Because if I'm not creating it whole cloth, or have a source book that can tell me, then I have to figure that out, which is extra time for me. But also, it just, part of the reason why I like modern fantasy is because then it sort of, it lets me examine things in the now, as opposed to examining things as they were. I'm not saying that I'm against it specifically. It's just not necessarily a thing that I would want to consider. Kung Fu Fenris, yes. We did have somebody try to dodge a ban. So the Disconcordia community and the RPGClinic community is like a Venn diagram that almost overlaps, but not quite. There were people who were part of Disconcordia who were not really a part of RPGClinic. So we had a bit of that to deal with as well. Every once in a while, we still see some people who were mostly Disconcordia show up in RPGClinic, and we're happy to see people, you know, for sure. But so it was an issue that we had to deal with. Thankfully, I don't believe that we ever had any major issues with anybody who was a big part of the RPGClinic community. So being a history major, absolutely. Kate is actually a history minor, but I'm not. I just haven't had that kind of exposure or interest in those sorts of things. And that's... That's also something that goes into our deciding in games. All of the players have a big vote in how games go, for sure. We all have an equal vote to a certain extent in that if anybody vetoes a game, it doesn't happen. Because we're not going to force anybody to play a game that they don't like. So it's not that I have a bigger vote, but I have bigger considerations. Because if I'm running the game, I have to be more familiar with it. I have to be willing to dive into it more. I have to be willing to communicate that world more. When it comes to games and game settings, I have to be familiar with the rules more. I have to be the one to teach the rules more. I have to be the one to adjudicate the rules. So a lot of the consideration that goes into a game is actually me. And that's not to say that everyone else doesn't have an equal say. It's just that we all have to recognize that if I'm unable or unwilling to do something, there's more opportunities for me to turn a game down than for players. A player has to worry about, am I going to be interested in the setting? Am I going to be interested in the systems as it pertains to the character I want to play? Can I think of a character that I want to play in this world? Am I going to enjoy the story? That's what they have to worry about. But I have to worry about not just, do I like the mechanics, but can I adjudicate these mechanics? Can I adjudicate these mechanics in a way that is satisfying, not just for players, but also for an audience? Can I know enough about the setting to introduce new elements to it so that not only do players recognize it, but that also maybe the audience would be interested in it as well? There's just more demands on me than there are on a player, and so therefore I am more likely to reject a game, is kind of what it comes down to. And there is also this. Historical gaming can be tough because then you can remember just how shitty life was back then. So people are very fond of saying like the world's on fire right now, everything's bad, everything's terrible, and in a large part they are correct. But also like there's never been a better time in a lot of ways, in most ways. In terms of like freedom, medicine, work, all of those sorts of things. Like violence is still absolutely a problem in a lot of places in the world, but there's never been a time that has been less violent than now. There's never been a time where crime has been better than now, overall, in general. And yeah, there are spikes, but like go back 100 years and things are awful in a lot of ways for a lot of different people. And this is uncharitable of me, but I will say it. There is a reason why a lot of people who are super interested in history are the ones with the privilege, because then they look back on the history and they don't have to necessarily think and remember about how it messed them over. It's how it messed everyone else over. So there is that. That is a thing that we've run into when it comes to history, is that I don't trust my own viewpoint on it. There's a couple of other things. When we look at our mechanics, we tend to bounce off mechanics that force player narrative control. As Kate mentioned in the thread on Discord, I'm not against players influencing the world, but we just don't enjoy nebulous narrative decision power. So not as much of a fan of a dice roll than saying to a player, you describe the room that you're in because you rolled this particular result. So you are going to decide what's in the room. Well, I don't like doing that. They prefer it when I do it, at least as far as I can tell. And it's not that I'm like, I don't want to give anybody control. It's just, that's just not the sorts of games that we want to play. A lot of these games, a lot of these systems are very popular in role-playing games right now for one very specific reason. It's hard to run games. And so what this does is that it shares the load among everybody, which can be a lot of fun. But it means that for somebody who is experienced, like I am, it means that all of a sudden I lose a lot of the control to tell the story and to present it in a way that I think is more compelling for the players. Because if they're being forced to interact with it in that way, then it can be a difficult situation for them specifically. If I'm saying like, hey, everybody, you can actually decide what the motivation is for this NPC, well, then that takes out a lot of their curiosity about interacting with that NPC, because all of a sudden they're the ones who've created it. So those are mechanics that we don't enjoy as much. Again, I definitely am fine and willing and thrilled when players make suggestions about the world. That's great. Like, also things like in Exalted, the idea of like, I want to establish a fact, fantastic, but those are player initiated moments. That's them deciding that they want to establish a fact, as opposed to the dice forcing them to establish a fact. So that's a thing that we've just run into. When it comes to games that are very rules light, we don't have enough crunch. So things like Fate, there's just not enough meat in there for us to interact with it. So at that point, we would rather not. Just trying to scramble through here because I don't see additional questions happening. D&D. Azul, no, it's not you. This was not. This is something that's come up several times. Because this is something that first you weren't there for the beginning, where I discussed previous games where this was a mechanic that was involved in the game and how we bounced off it. D&D is a game that we likely will not. There's the latest editions of D&D are designed very specifically to be played not theater of the mind. I know you can, but it's unsatisfying. I think the mechanics are not designed for it well. And I don't have the time or the patience or the will to have battle maps ready and all of that. I'm much more freeform in my storytelling. And therefore I don't want to have to be like, okay, well, now I need a map for this, and then I need a map for that, and I have to have planned encounters for all of these things, because like that's just not a game that I'm interested in running. So it's also on stream. We would have to use a virtual tabletop. Not a bad thing, because we can't afford a massive space with many different cameras and camera operators so that we can show minis on the table. But then that's another thing that we would have to pay attention to in addition to streaming. Streaming is already a lot of mental tax. The more stuff that I have to interact with, the more that things will be forgotten and left behind. So D&D is a no. It's very likely a no. I have enjoyed D&D. I've played D&D and I've run D&D, not on a stream. I don't think that that's something that I would be interested in. Although somebody did mention, yeah, D&D's game, the D&D game that I actually enjoyed the most was 4th. Funnily enough. I think 5th is probably the edition that's best for most people, but I thought 4th was actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. But 4th I played when I was playing it, because I never ran it. I was only a player. We basically ran that like a video game. You know, like that was just battle tactics, and that was fun to play. Yeah, Miss Rich, I agree. Daggerheart is designed, I think, so that Theater of the Mind works. But for people who don't want Theater of the Mind, they have options. So I think that works well. Folks, I think Scott's streaming. And I think if Scott's streaming, that I would like to pass things along to them, because I think you, along with everybody else, wants to see him date everything. I have to thank you for your questions. I don't know if I explained this whole topic. If there's more questions that you have about how we choose our campaigns, throw them on the Discord. If I get enough questions, I'll just do another one of these, because I'm happy to do that. In the meantime, the next session that we'll be running of Montreal by Moonlight, our Werewolf the 5th edition campaign, will be on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern daylight time. But I am thrilled that we get to keep playing that. Again, we don't have an end date for it. That doesn't mean that we're not going to keep looking out for the next campaign. And as always, if you have an issue at your role-playing table, whether it's virtual, real, or non-existent, it's sometimes the hardest option, but often the best, to use your word hole. We'll see you next time.